Lately, it's become popular to claim that all exercise is bad for you and you should just sit on the couch all day relaxing. There are some reasons to be cautious with exercise, and you should never see it as the main way to improve your health, but it can definitely benefit you if done correctly. Another week, another endless list of crazy ideas promoted on the internet, but unfortunately I only have time to address the very worst ones.
Captain's log supplemental. We have regained visual contact with the lab, but our attempts to restore communication with this microbrain, as we have come to call it, have been unsuccessful. One thing that is certain, however, this life form has declared war on us.
Just so you know, I'm going to be traveling this week and I'm still very busy with all the things that have been happening. But I did get my new computer set up on Linux finally, and in the long run this will help a lot as my computer was just so slow with editing, and already I can tell that this is going to be about 10 times faster. I've been thinking about making this video for a long time since seeing a guy on YouTube called Tech Lead, who made a video about muscle and exercise being unhealthy. Since he's been disgraced for alleged crypto scams and copyright abuse, and since he's known for making copyright claims, I won't sample his video, but it somehow managed to sum up everything wrong with people's attitudes towards science. This guy likes to talk about his credentials, which probably do sound very impressive to people who don't really understand them. To me, this guy embodies the concept of a slave mentality perfectly. In fact, I never really understood exactly why people are like that until watching a few of these videos, and it finally started to sink in. I've come to realize the reason many people support guidelines like the diabetes pyramid so hard is that they feel if they support some hierarchy of authority, then they can take on some of that authority for themselves. In their minds, they can work up the ranks, as it were. All of this exists only in the realm of perceptions, but if you can promote the quote-unquote right ideas, then you can not only make it within the system, but also project some of that aura of authority yourself. You'll also get the support of all the other BSers, so it lends you some credibility. In essence, you are willing to be a tool of tyranny because you can become a mini tyrant yourself. But in the long run, this will always have bad consequences for everyone, including you.
I've got bowling alleys and fast food joints.
You have much more than that, Richie. And you will know it when it starts to die before you.
It's a very alien mindset to me, and I think to most people, but it explains a lot of the inexplicable behavior I see from people who love to jump in and spew word salad about topics they don't really know anything much about, and why they just can't accept that the so-called authorities cannot always be trusted. The first claim he makes is that all animals live only long enough to have 1 billion heartbeats. Therefore, exercising is basically using up your heartbeats. I remember first seeing this in a USA Today article in the late 90s or early 2000s, but this is simply not true. That holds true in general for animals in the wild, but doesn't apply to humans or domesticated animals due to sanitation, antibiotics, and simply lack of predators. For a human, 1 billion beats is less than 40 years, so it's easy to see on the face of it that this is simply not true. Exercise also tends to lower your resting heart rate, so if this were a causative agent somehow, then that means exercise would be a good thing. The next argument he has is that the extra tissue for muscle is hard on the heart. After all, you only get 1 billion beats, right? So it's really your heart that limits how long you're going to live. Muscle is full of mitochondria that burn energy, and this includes your heart. It's also the main place that glucose goes when insulin rises in the body. Excessively high insulin is one of the worst things possible for your health, especially for your blood pressure, but the more mitochondria you have in your body, especially your muscle, the less insulin is needed and the less insulin resistance your body will develop. It's also very important for your heart function, and some forms of exercise can greatly increase mitochondrial function in the heart. Muscle is also very important for avoiding frailty with age. Muscles are critical for proper balance, and without regular use, they slowly stop working over time. especially with age. Time and again, I've seen elderly people get a small injury, then go to the hospital and catch an illness and never recover. Or they can't move well anymore and eventually they wind up bedridden, which is often a one-way process that leads to a sad and lingering demise. Keep in mind though, it is really strength that matters in this regard, not muscle size. Thankfully, it is less hard on the body to slowly increase strength than it is to do large amounts of muscle building work, which generally requires a lot of volume, especially for the elderly who generally just want to keep their strength in the normal range. Muscle can help with total mitochondria, which drive your metabolic rate and help prevent insulin resistance. It also helps you avoid frailty and injury in old age. However, that doesn't always mean you can tell who's healthy or not healthy simply by looking at them. Many of the things people do while attempting to get muscular are very unhealthy. PEDs, of course, are extremely unhealthy, but so is a high-carb diet. Unfortunately, that's what most fitness influencers promote for gaining muscle and increasing athletic performance too, even though it is not based on real science, and in reality, a low-carb diet is always going to give you a better body composition and better exercise performance, except during a very long race. And even then, once it gets long enough, then it switches over to entirely fat burning being what's important. It's also important to realize that exercise mainly helps your muscular mitochondria. Exercise also stimulates cytochrome C oxidase, which is a big part of how methylene blue and phototherapy work their magic, but it does so in a much smaller degree outside of the muscle tissue. So in the brain and liver, for example, which are the two most important places to have healthy mitochondria, it's probably not going to do all that much. So while many fitness gurus will tell you that exercise is the way to maintain mitochondrial health, this is only partially true. You can also induce autophagy through exercise, but again it is mainly in the muscle, and while autophagy is one of the important benefits of fasting, it is only a small part of the many benefits that fasting induces. Recently, a big fitness channel called The Buff Dudes tried some fasting and someone drew my attention to it in the comments. I was very surprised at how poorly these two bodybuilders were able to handle fasting, especially the one larger brother. As I have expounded on in the past, it is largely the health of your liver that dictates how easy it will be to fast. And unfortunately, many of the things done in the bodybuilding world lead to terrible liver health, even if the bodybuilder looks amazing. And what dictates liver health is the mitochondrial health of your liver. A high-carb diet, high insulin from eating many meals a day, and for those who take them, PEDs, all have a terrible effect on the liver in particular. So while I am sure that getting strong is quite healthy for you, if done slowly and rationally, as described in my past video, doing everything possible to get huge amounts of muscle is almost certainly not going to be good for you, especially if you're doing it in the more dodgy ways. So what about cardio? This guy also claims cardio is very unhealthy, and surprisingly I've seen many other people going along with this idea, but I just can't go along with this.
Standard response to unforeseen dilemmas perfected over many centuries.
What?
Nothing.
You know, I think I like the other mythos better.
Starting at 8 years old, I did sprint intervals with my father, who was into track in high school and was an avid running enthusiast and an avid reading enthusiast as well, so he read all of those old magazines. Later I moved on to distance running, but I realized over time that the more I ran, the worse I looked and felt, and the worse off my knees were. To save what was left of my knees, I stopped running, but now I've realized that as with lifting weights, it is the intensity that matters for cardio. To improve your cardio ability or improve your speed, the only way to do it is with sprinting intervals or other more intense exercises. Plodding running just doesn't make you faster, it makes you slower, and it also makes you less healthy if you do it enough. That was how the 4-minute mile was broken, not by running endless mile races, but by doing special so-called pacing exercises. And these are actually exercises that intensely work out your leg muscles, and especially the controlling muscles in your legs. And this helps a great deal with races. And there's no one on earth who trains for a marathon by doing endless plodding jogging. No one with a good time anyway. So that begs the question, if we don't need these very long distance runs to increase our speed, performance, or VO2 max, why are we doing them? The answer is we don't need to do it except to win a medal, otherwise it's just pointless. Walking is also quite good for you, and if you're over 50, the last thing you want to do is start sprinting. You can do quite a bit of walking, but eventually you may be limited in what you can do there as well, especially if you used to be an avid runner like my father, in which case you'll probably have painful bone spurs just like he does, which prevent him from doing this anymore. Thankfully, you can apply the same concept to a bicycle, stationary bike, elliptical, or whatever cardio machine you're able to comfortably use. 10 to 20 seconds of high effort followed by about 40 to 50 seconds of cruising. You can even start with just one cycle like this per workout session and very slowly work your way up and do whatever feels good. You can also extend the cruising time upwards, so you could do 2 or 3 minutes of cruising and then 10 to 20 seconds of intense work. I also suggest you don't go to the absolute top intensity, especially if you're older. 80 to 90% is perfectly fine, and make sure you're healthy enough to exercise before doing so. This is completely going to avoid things like shin splints, which are totally unnecessary to become athletic and to have good cardio performance. In fact, you can easily get much faster on the same distance as someone who just goes at it bonzo and gets these shin splints, because most coaches have no idea what they're doing, especially in high school. In fact, this kind of thing is actually usually what's holding people back from getting really good performance, and they get stuck in the mediocre good range for their whole life, just like they do with weightlifting. I do think cardio has a place, but the cardio that is scientifically proven to give us the most benefit is nothing like what people today seem to think it should be. In a more natural environment, we would be walking a lot every day, and occasionally we would do a little bit of running or climbing or moving heavy objects, say to build a shelter, for example. We would never go for a 5-mile jog, let alone for a marathon. And in the original story of the marathon, the runner died at the end. That's something to consider. Now, all exercise spikes cortisol, and a small amount of cortisol is normal and natural. But these long-distance, high-intensity activities will drive cortisol to crazy extremes that our bodies just aren't designed to deal with on a chronic basis. It is a popular myth that distance running style hunting, where the hunter just wears out a deer or something like that, is what led to humans being as they are today. But this is easily disproven. First off, a deer is a very low-rank animal to try and go after because it has very little fat on it. And the sand people did not even inhabit the areas where they did this. And in fact, they don't even inhabit them at all today either. And they're essentially going extinct. That is just how they lived after being pushed out of better areas by the stronger, more aggressive tribes like the Zulu. And this is actually a very undesirable place to live that's you can barely eke out an existence in. The animals we hunted thousands of years ago were gigantic megafauna, and we have endless proof showing this. And we've also shown time and again that people just didn't move around very much in those days, both from isotope analysis and from all the evidence we have that they did ambush hunting. That's what people did. They hunted things like woolly mammoths, they drove them off cliffs, they drove them into rocks and on like that. It's all over the world that this happened, so it's not like in one place humans did this and one place they did the other thing. No, they were amazingly successful hunters that hunted these giant animals. The areas that all of this was said to happen were also jungle at the time that it's claimed humans evolved there. Now, I don't believe they came from there anyway, which is a very recent and politically motivated argument. But that's another story, and I'm not going to go into that, though the whole thing is totally ridiculous. But I do talk about it in detail in one of my older videos about ancestral eating. And it's important to realize what our real origin is if you're going to understand how we're going to eat. And all of us were very similar all across the globe. and much different than today, and we all had much larger brain sizes too, because we ate the diet that we're supposed to be eating, which is a lot of fatty meat. In short, we're just not made for distance running. We're made for walking, some climbing. We're pretty good climbers. And of course, we're extremely good at doing work with our hands. And we also would have had to occasionally move heavy objects, especially for building shelters. And we occasionally did short bursts of speed. And if you look at children playing, they kind of imitate this with all their play. They do a walk around, then they run a little bit, then they jump a little bit, they do a little climbing, and so on and so forth. So don't kill yourself doing unnatural exercises like jogging. But don't be deluded into thinking that our natural lifestyle is sitting in a computer all day, eating beef jerky and drinking coffee with sweeteners in it. No one leads an ideal life, and that probably was true even thousands of years ago, but you'll be better off if you do a little exercise, especially some walking and some weightlifting, because that's going to mimic what we used to do in the past. Some people also claim fasting is unhealthy, but I have no doubt I'd be dead now without it. For me, the reduction in blood pressure is the most important aspect, but it's also helped tremendously with my carb addiction and my tendency to overeat. While the biggest fear people have about fasting is losing muscle, this just isn't going to happen on short-term fasts. If anything, the opposite tends to occur, and in a 6-month alternate day fasting study with no exercise involved, a group of men lost an average of about 10 pounds of fat while gaining an average of about 2 pounds of lean tissue at the same time. The group losing weight with dieting lost less fat, and at the same time they lost several pounds of lean tissue. The fasting group also had a higher metabolism at the end. Now 6-month studies are about as long as we ever get, and most of the scientific wisdom we get in those dietary and exercise domains comes from very short experimental studies, if it's based on experimental data at all. Most of it is based on epidemiological nonsense or short 4-week studies. Personally, I've found fasting to be great for working out. I keep getting stronger even though I'm in my 50s, and all the fitness influencers that I see act as though they have one foot in the grave by the time they hit 40, or even sooner. Fasting increases norepinephrine, so it can actually increase your strength a bit, and I find working out just before breaking a fast works very well. But exercise is largely about willpower, so some people can sabotage themselves if they don't feel their best, but if you push through, it's not going to be a problem, and this is going to also be good for building more willpower, which is also what you need to build strength.
I think I have heat stroke. You have lollygagger syndrome, that's what you have. Here, freshen this up for Daddy. Why?
Sure, I'll take another Fanta.
Protein supplements won't do much to make you more muscular, if anything at all. It's hard not to get enough total protein in the diet if you live in a Western country, and total protein is seldom what holds people back, though protein quality can be if you don't eat very many animal products. The only thing really useful in whey protein supplements is probably the leucine content, but it is much cheaper and more effective to simply take some leucine with your meals instead of paying 10 times as much for the same benefits. More protein from meat, dairy, and fish, on the other hand, has hard data showing it leads to more lean tissue mass. That's probably because it's full of endless nutrients, and these are all necessary for muscle building and other lean tissue building. This includes carnosine, carnitine, creatine, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, taurine, EPA, DHA, and much more. Many of these are sold as supplements in their own right, and all are absolutely required to build muscle. Many of them are also required for all types of cells to function properly, especially EPA and DHA, which are required for your brain and for all cell membranes to function properly. And keep in mind that this is also critically important for your muscles. It's really the animal fat that's going to help you to increase your strength, especially when you get it to very high levels. That's because your strength is really controlled by your neurons, and if you're going to have them working well enough to really drive your strength up, you're going to have those in top shape too, and not just your muscles. This is also the area that tends to die off in the elderly, and this is what leads to sarcopenia. Without the neurons in the brain to trigger them to operate, your muscles simply wither over time. Strength is largely about willpower, and I've noticed in myself and others that simply putting the work in to become stronger also has an effect in the other areas of life. It requires brain power to move your body, but specifically willpower. And if you can stand up to a heavy lift, you'll probably also find you can stand up to people around you as well. Also keep in mind that intense physical activity like sprinting and weightlifting also increases BDNF in the brain, and this is critical for making new neurons, and this is going to benefit the rest of the brain as well. Plodding low intensity exercises like jogging actually don't have the same effect on the body. We live in a world where little can be trusted, and I think it's important to address ideas like this. There may be some truth that cardio can be destructive at worst and pointless at best when done in a certain manner, but overall exercise can be very healthy for you. At the same time, don't think it can undo the damage of the bad diet, especially when it comes to processed foods like bread, sugar, veg oils, and packaged foods, which usually have all of the above in it. Weightlifting is helpful for the body, and especially for avoiding frailty with age, which ultimately has a lethal effect even if the ultimate cause of death is often listed as something seemingly much different like pneumonia. Weightlifting also stimulates neuronal growth in the brain, so it can help with more than just health and appearance. Like the rest of your body, your heart is an amazing creation, and the stronger it is in general, the healthier you will be. Exercise that increases your cardio capacity, like interval training, also lowers your heart rate and increases the body's ability to distribute blood to the body. Weightlifting also increases mitochondria in the heart and actually makes it much stronger. Long distance cardio, on the other hand, can have the opposite effect, and it can push cortisol into the extreme levels that are very damaging to your muscle, including the heart. Exercising won't directly make you live longer or do a whole lot for your mitochondria aside from those in your muscle, so don't mistake looks or even exercise performance with good health, as this is very often not the case, as Jim Fixx proves. The critical mitochondria in your brain and liver will be helped a great deal more by dietary animal fat, especially stearic acid, which strengthens mitochondrial function, and EPA and DHA, which not only are crucial for the brain, but also the cellular membrane and protecting your mitochondria, which is in stark contrast to other PUFAs. But the best thing you can do for your mitochondria is always going to be fasting, especially for those in your liver, and this is where most of the autophagy that they're talking about during fasting is occurring. And it has such a healthy effect because your liver is where mitochondrial and metabolic health begin. Exercise can be harmful or a waste of your body's resources, but it can also be very helpful. However, it is not a substitute for a healthy whole food, animal-based diet or for fasting. And it's a field with more con men in it than true experts. In fact, I'd say there's at least 7 con men for each honest one.
Unless, of course, somebody comes up with 6-minute abs, then you're in trouble, huh?
Whoa! No, not 6. I said 7. Do you know that old children's tale from the sea? It's like you're dreaming about gorgonzola cheese when it's clearly brie time.